business minds and thought leaders share the secrets to success. Welcome to Call Me Successful.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very excited today for our next guest, Andrew McCulloch, who's the Director of Ray White Australia. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Director of Growth, just we don't want to upset Dan.
Oh, no, we don't want to do that.
I
should get that right. I've seen the title so many times. I suppose you've changed a few different roles lately, and so that's probably why I got me confused. But let's start off with this question of why real estate? How did you get into real estate? Because you're one of those Australians who have done well in Australia, but you're actually you're a proper Kiwi.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've still got the passport and everything.
Same as me.
I don't like rugby and they haven't taken it off me yet. So, how did I get into real estate? Great question. I remember quite vividly. I would have been about probably 6 or 7 years old, and I was standing out the front of my parents' house with my mum and dad, and someone pulled up in a car that my parents knew, and they were chatting to him. And I didn't take much notice of him, but I took a lot of notice of the vehicle. So I've got this thing for cars. And he was in a brand new Mercedes, and he left, and I said to my mum, "What does that guy do for a job?" She said, "He's a real estate agent." And I went, "I want to be a real estate agent." that was pretty much it. Like that was it
when he's 7 years old.
It was from that moment, yeah. So I did a few things after school. I went and did an apprenticeship, car painting apprenticeship, and I actually had my lungs collapse twice, independently of one another, thank God. And the doctor said, "You probably shouldn't do this anymore." I was 17 at the time. And I thought I'm going to get into real estate. And I was flatting with a couple of mates, and I rang my mum and I said, "I'm going to go into real estate." And she said, "You're too young, you'll never make it." And I went, "Good." She was in real estate at the time. So that was about all the motivation I needed to go and write more than she was in my first year. So.
Yeah, and you're a proper Kiwi because you use the term flatting, which we don't use in Australia.
Really? What is it here?
I don't know what it is in there. Roommates or something along those lines. So what was your first role in New Zealand? Was it like you're just associate selling straight into real estate?
Straight into com-only sales. So it was a sink or swim sort of environment. I had a really good manager at the time, a guy by the name of Phil Horrobin. His son still runs a number of Ray Whites today in Auckland, Daniel Horrobin, including the City Apartments business. So I was really lucky to have such an amazing mentor from the get-go, and it was definitely the reason that I succeeded so quickly. And I remember saying to Phil, I said, "Mate, I'm going to book the appointments. I just need you to come with me, and I'm just going to watch." And I did that for 6 months. And I realised that he only had sort of 10 lines that he would pull out. And I brought this up with him, and he said, "Yeah, Andrew," he said, "but it's the first time they've heard it." So he said, don't reinvent the wheel here. This is a simple business. I remember him talking about the fact that all you needed in this game was a phone. He pulled his phone out, and he said, "All you need is a phone." He said, "If you want to go be a plumber or an electrician or anything like that," he said, "you're going to have to go and buy a van and tools." And he said, "You'll make half the money." He said, "You can make $1 million with this thing."
So you did have mobile phones back in that day?
It wasn't that long ago. But yes, we did. They were a little bit bigger than they are now.
A little bit bigger.
Yeah.
So how long were you there in New Zealand doing that? Is that with Ray White, or is it another brand at that stage?
That was with Ray White. So I started my career with Ray White. And I was there from the age of, I was in real estate there from the age of 17 to 26.
Yeah, wow.
Before moving to Sydney.
So why cross the ditch? What happened? Like, why come to Australia?
So, as I said, I rose to success pretty quickly. I tried to remain in the top 5 within the business at all times. Like a lot of young salespeople, I thought that I knew everything. Pretty arrogant, pretty cocky.
That's changed now?
Of course. And I thought that I could do it myself. I went and sort of ran an office for Megan Jaffe, actually, out of Parnell. And the GFC hit about a week after. I'd sort of shaken hands with her on doing a deal for me to come in and be part owner of that business and run that with her. And at that time, through the GFC, we went for 3 months, a 3-month stretch with not a house selling in the area. So not just the office that I was running, but nothing. And it just became pretty difficult. I was leveraged pretty hard. I had a house in Ponsonby at the time, a couple of European cars. And that year of that GFC hit, everything just sort of fell apart. So the business kind of fell apart. My career wasn't looking great. My wife at the time and I were having issues, and everything just sort of crumbled. So everything had fallen apart for me in New Zealand. I'd come off such a high, and it was a massive sort of shake-up for me. And I felt that I knew I had to rebuild. I knew I had the energy. I was still young. I knew I could do it, but I really felt that I needed to change my environment. So I sold everything I had. I had about $2,000 in my pocket, and I bought a flight to Sydney with $2,000.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
$2,000 was 2008.
Yeah.
2008
Yeah.
GFC.
I was just after, because I'd sort of obviously things had wound down, and I continued to try, and I'd shifted, and I think I went back to being a salesperson in South Auckland for 12 months or something, and things just weren't working. So, yeah.
So you went from Ponsonby, Parnell, then to South Auckland.
Yeah, I was selling in South Auckland, and I was sleeping on a mate's couch, and I'd got enough money together to buy a house in Otahu, which was pretty rough. I think it's probably improved now. It's got a bit more expensive, but
I was going to say some people say it's still rough.
Yeah,
No offense.
yeah. Look, it probably is, but I'll tell you what, it was a far cry from Ponsonby, and so I had managed to buy that house. So I rented that out and flew to Sydney.
So what did you do in Sydney? You get to Sydney, you've lived the highs in New Zealand, you've got the cars, the houses, you've owned companies.
Yep.
Come here with 2K. What does Andrew McCulloch do next?
So I landed. I went and rented a room in Redfern. I was flatting.
As you do.
And I initially took a job out of the industry just to I didn't know where I was. I'd been to Sydney once. I didn't know the market. I didn't know any people. So I took a job out of the industry for about 7 months before the CEO of Harcourts at the time called me, and he said, Andrew, I see on LinkedIn that you're now in Sydney, and we'd love to chat to you about an opportunity in our corporate office. So I went in and I took that job, and that was kind of the start of my corporate career for Harcourts.
What's the role entail in Harcourts? Because is that recruitment as well back then? That's where you started recruitment?
Yeah, it was pure recruitment. I was there for less than 12 months. CEO changed out. It was fair to say that him and I probably didn't see eye to eye. He freed up my future. And
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I went and worked at LJ Hooker. I think about the same time that you might have been.
Same time as I went there. It's really fascinating when you look at the LJ Hooker story and what you did there, because I remember someone saying, like, you've recruited 30 officers, correct me if I'm wrong, in 1 year. Is it 30?
So I was there 4 years.
4 years.
My final year with them, my wife was pregnant. We'd just bought a house in Darlinghurst. I didn't feel that I could afford any of that. I didn't feel I could afford the house. I didn't feel I could afford having a child. And I just worked. I'd lost my license at the time. I was living in Zetland. I was walking. I'd work all day, and then I'd walk from Zetland to Darlinghurst to renovate the house all night. I'd sleep for 3 hours and then go to work. And I had to work pretty hard. We did, in that final year that I was at LJ Hooker, we did 69 new officers, and I personally put on 47 of them. That's
insane. It's stunning.
I was pretty motivated.
Yeah. So can I ask you this? Because we struggle sometimes as principals recruiting staff.
Yeah.
But I think it's in some ways recruiting businesses and offices are 10 times harder. That's my opinion anyway. You might disagree. But what do you do to convince these people to join another brand?
So the two recruitment pieces there, you talk about salespeople and you talk about businesses, they are a different skill set, and it's very hard to be good at both of them. But they're definitely a different skill set. First of all, you've got to believe in what you've got. And that time that I was at Hookers, everything was going really well. It was a great business. It had a good team there. The corporate team was there. It was firing. It really felt like it was firing. I believed in what I was selling. So, and it was just a matter of sort of getting out there. Ultimately in recruitment, you make friends for a living, right? So I was just doing the numbers. I was on the phone. I was out in front of people. It was a numbers game. It was, when I say it still is a numbers game. But I put the work in. It was hard work.
And the fundamentals, you reckon it's stronger back then than it is now, because recruiting that many officers, and I'm assuming you were national, not just Sydney based.
Yeah, I was national. Yep.
Like, how do you get that face to face? Like, how do you make that happen?
Well, it was up to 6 airplanes a week. I had for lack of a better word, I had an EA who was on the phone, so I had someone helping me prospect, and they were just setting up meetings flat out, filling my calendar. I would literally wake up in the morning, go to the airport and pull out my phone and look at where I was flying to, sort of thing. It was crazy. It was long hours. I was only home in the weekends. It was just a lot of hard grind.
So the key to real estate, and it always comes down to recruitment, whether it's recruiting sellers, recruiting agents, or recruiting officers, and you seem to have mastered it early on in your career. So can I ask you about one of your biggest recruits, our mutual friend Vivian Yap, because that kind of shook up the industry when you got Vivian Yap along. How did that come about?
I used to really make a point of sort of trying to recruit one big name per annum, and I used to go to ARIC and I'd watch the stage and then I'd try and grab one. So the first one was actually John McManus. That was the big recruit that sort of, I guess, put my name up in lights.
So John McManus joined from where to Al Hooker?
John McManus came from McGrath. He was, I think, their number one salesperson at the time. I'd seen him speak at ARIC. I got in touch with him. We started chatting. He was just a salesperson at that point, and we managed to pull him over to Al Hooker. And obviously that gave me a lot of confidence to get someone of that sort of caliber over to the business. The next big one was Vivian. I remember going to WA and looking, the state manager at the time had a map on the wall, and the map showed where all the offices were, and there was this big gap where there was nothing. And I said, "What's that?" Like, I didn't know anything about Perth. He goes, "That's the western suburbs." I said, "Why haven't we got any offices there?" And he laughed. He said, "Mate, no franchise will ever make it in the western suburbs." I said, "Really?" And so I took that as a
challenge,
personal challenge.
Yeah.
And once again, I got to it. I saw Vivian on the stage at ARIC that year. I went and did a bunch of research. I got in front of a bunch of people. I got told by everyone, there are no franchises here. Franchises don't work. The customer doesn't want a franchise. They want the boutique. And I struck up a reasonably good friendship with Vivian. She was very approachable. I remember asking her at the time, I said, "You must get calls like this all the time." She said, "Actually, no one calls me," which I thought was funny.
Because they don't think they can move her.
That was back then. I think it's changed heavily now. I think people have got confidence in ringing these people now. But back then, no one was ringing her. Big name. Everyone assumed she was untouchable, wouldn't move. I've got this thing around self-limiting beliefs. I think we're capable of doing anything if we believe we can do it. I knew I was going to get someone. I didn't, and I'd hoped it was her. But it wasn't easy. It took me about a year of showing up, dinners with her family, lunches with her family.
How many flights to Perth in that 12 months from Sydney?
I used to spend 1 week of every month in Perth. So I was in and out of there a lot. I caught up with them away on their family holiday in Bali. It was like, people think, you just make a call, you show up, you have a meeting, you offer them a job, they say no, you move on. It's not like that at all.
You became like a part of their family in a way.
Well, yeah, it was almost like, I remember sort of closing her, for lack of a better term, and I almost think she felt like she owed it to me for the amount of time. I don't know, I should probably ask her that. But it was definitely through a relationship. And it was a relationship of trust that her and I had built, and this goes for any recruit. This is not just her, but while we're using her as an example, there was a level of trust. They've got to like you first, then they've got to like the brand, then they've got to like what the brand has. And if you fall down at any of those points, you're not getting a deal, right? So I was lucky, and at the time, I think I felt that Al Hooker had a pretty good offering in the marketplace. I was definitely the most aggressive recruiter in the marketplace, hands down. I knew that if I came up against another brand, they weren't going to win, because I was just move quicker. I'd move quicker. I'd be more aggressive. And she agreed to come over. Now, not long after she came over, I got a call from Brian White saying, basically, words to the effect of, when are you coming home, sort of thing, And
So did you have a relationship with Brian in Auckland?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'd most of my early years had been with Ray White, and so I'd actually done a little bit of time in the corporate office there, working with him, but just prior to moving to Sydney, so working with Kerry Smith, the CEO there. I guess I was reasonably well known, definitely in New Zealand, not so much in Australia, but by then I think the noise had started to happen, and you get a couple of these big recruits over and people start looking and saying, who's doing this? What's he doing? How's he doing it? We should be speaking to him. And that was probably where Brian was coming from, more than remembering who I was just who's this?
It's very hard to say no to Brian White.
Well, I didn't. I said, no problem. He wanted to meet me at Indigo in Double Bay the next morning for coffee, and I went along. And I remember sort of talking to Brian about what he wanted. He said, "I want you to come and work alongside me." And at the time, he was sort of starting to transition back into a chairman role, and Dan was coming in. And I met Dan a couple of times at Indigo. But when I had made that decision, and they were very generous in their original offer to me, Brian sort of said, "What's the number?" and I made a number up, and he just said yes. And I thought, well, I guess I'm coming to Bray White.
Yeah, wow.
But the most difficult phone call I had to make was to Vivian.
It's almost like that, isn't it? When you've got all these people that come on the basis of trusting you, your word, and then you're leaving them, sort of, it does feel a little bit like you've let them down.
100%. You know, I'd spent a lot of time convincing her that this was the best option. And then I was leaving that option to go and do something else. Then I had to start convincing her again.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So, firstly, I want to say how many deals has actually been done at Indigo and Double Bay? Because it's commonplace for people to make deals. Is it just like you hang around there like Eric and hopefully an agent walks in?
It's like the Carlisle in Brisbane. It's just filled with real estate agents.
So the role that Brian gave you was head of network development
Back then,
for Ray White?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now you had the same role that you had in Alger Hooker, was to go now sell Ray White to everyone that you were connected with and the new recruits.
Yep.
How did you find that change?
It was hard. It was actually hard. I had built such a reputation and name for myself under that Alger Hooker brand. I was then all of a sudden at a new brand saying, I told you that was the best, but no, actually this is the best. And so I had to back that with a lot of fact, and I was lucky that I was able to, but it wasn't easy making that move. And look, the role was the same, but it was similar, but it wasn't the same. So I was straight away sort of in charge of growing a recruitment team out at Ray White, a national team, and I was less involved in that front end, you know, sort of, I guess, cradle to grave recruitment. It was more running the team and helping them go and close deals. So I started to fly around the country again, but it was really the tail end of the deal. So I was coming in at the tail end to close deals. Closing is probably where my strength sits. And so I think that was probably identified pretty early in my time back at Ray White, and that's where they deployed me.
So recruitment, you're recruiting businesses, you're recruiting agents to become business owners. Now, all of a sudden, that new role comes up that you're running the state, New South Wales, as the CEO.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I didn't want it.
Why not?
I felt like as the recruitment guy, you kind of fly under the radar. At the time I was driving an AMG GT, fine when you're the recruitment guy, not fine when you're the CEO. I could wear loud suits. It was an aspirational role. So I felt like I could kind of be me. I was out entertaining all the time. I was having fun. It wasn't that there was no responsibility, but you could be more irresponsible with your responsibility because it was lunches and dinners and closing and, you know.
People want fun.
Correct.
Yeah.
I was the party, you know. So all of a sudden, now you're going to run a state, you have to tone it down a little bit, you know.
And did you tone it down?
Yeah, I mean, I sold the AMG GT and I bought a 740 BMW, so I felt like I bought the old man car.
Such a trade down, Andrew. Such a trade down.
Like it wasn't very fast, but it was a whole different beast. In recruitment, you're everyone's friend. As the CEO of the state, you're often the enemy, and I think I struggled a lot with the. I don't want to say negativity, but it wasn't as positive as the recruitment piece. And you had to deal with negative conversations. So all of a sudden you're talking to people about their fee card. Like they don't want to talk about their fee card.
I think like what I've found is it's a lot easier to deal with high performing agents. It's a lot harder to deal with high performing principals because you've got 120 people under you, you've got 30 people's dreams and aspirations as well. Whereas a high performing agent, it's just you.
Yeah.
So that becomes harder. That's why the juggle is harder.
Well, I think, it was easy for me to make my mark in recruitment because it was just like, just go get a heavy hitter. Just every year, just go and deliver one. It was not easy, but I knew what my goal was. So coming into that CEO role, and I've come in on the back of Stephen Nell. You know, he's been there for 20 years. People liked Stephen. I thought, how am I going to make this my own? How am I going to put my own stamp on it? What am I going to do different to everyone else? How am I going to grow this beast? You know, it was a huge business. But Stephen had come in at that CEO role when he was about 30. He'd done a bunch of recruitment, growing the state, and then his principals had probably aged with him. And I say that respectfully. They went on his career path with him or his career growth with him. So I got in there, and Ray White New South Wales wasn't cool. It wasn't the cool place to be, right? So it was, if you were in Sydney especially, and even more so at the time, in some of our blue markets, you wanted to work for some of the boutique brands. They were their marketing was more what that age demographic was after. So I knew I had two tasks. I had to make us cool again, and I had to win back the trust and give value to our existing network. So we had a few common complaints like, I never see anyone from corporate, don't get any value, you guys never deliver what you promise, all that sort of thing. That was a two-prong approach to the success in there. We created things called partnership plans, which was based around how I was going to give back value to our current network. And it was a fancy name for a business plan, but a lot of people build a business plan and you look at it and it's just a page full of goals, right? We knew that we had to do something different. So it was more around, where are you going? How do we help you get there? We knew we could only do 4 things per year, so 1 per quarter. We had to execute hard, and we had to bring the whole team on the journey with us. And for the first time in 120 odd years, we asked our franchisees what they wanted rather than telling them. So that changed the culture of the business that we had. So not that I'd fixed that, but we were on our way. That was starting to work. Then I had this thing where, okay, now I need to bring youth in. I need to bring the new blood in. I need to make us cool again. And so we created these breakfasts of high performers from different markets, and we pulled them together, and it wasn't branded Ray White. There was no, there was an agenda where we wanted to recruit these guys, but it was more around how could we give back to the industry and how could we get great people together to talk about making this industry better. Now, as a result of that, we built relationships with them. They built relationships with each other, and we started to get this group of what was heavily dominated by males in their late 20s, early 30s, and it was mainly males, not through design, but that was the market. That was the majority of the marketplace of high performers throughout Sydney at the time. So we did things like I'd go and hire the racetrack, because a lot of these guys had Ferraris and Lambos and Porsches and all these sorts of things, and we'd go and race our cars around tracks.
And you brought your BMW along?
No, by then I think I had something else. I had an M8 or something. It was much quicker. And we did whiskey tasting and cigar rolling and dinners with Mark Boris and, all these things that all of a sudden we became cool. And as a result of that, people started to join us. And when people started to join us, we were getting guys like Josh Teslin, Peter Domintides, Shiv Nair. This young crew started to roll through and people started to take notice.
I wanted to ask you about the partnership plans, because I got a copy of your partnership plan, I think 3-4 years ago.
Yep.
And it kind of changed my thinking as well, because as principals, we always complain about networks, like every single principal does in every single network.
Yep.
But it kind of shifts the onus on the principal, doesn't it? That this is everything that the network has, whichever network you're in, and why aren't you taking advantage of that stuff?
Yeah, well, there was maybe a lack of transparency to our network on what we had, but we were trying to make these guys drink from the fire hose. Our franchise offering was like this,
yeah,
and we were trying to jam it down everyone's throat, when all they needed was this, and we just needed to give them a lot of that, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, and everyone's got that different little piece that they need.
The amazing thing is we did over 200 of them, and every business was different. There were some similarities between some of them, but they all wanted different things from us. So we had for years been trying to jam all this stuff down their throat they didn't even want. We'd never asked them what they wanted, and we'd definitely not delivered it. And all of a sudden we were. So I tell you, once that started, there was a few things that happened. Poor performers started to drop off because it was too much for them. It was always their plan, not mine. So I'd only hold them accountable to what they had promised. But they weren't doing it. So that filtered those guys out pretty quickly. But people started to see value again. So I never had a conversation about franchise fees again after that. Because what were they? Andrew, we're not getting any value. Really? We've sat down a partnership plan with you and you haven't delivered on what you said. I think we've kept up our, you know what I mean?
So it's a genuine partnership plan.
100%. I believed we were in partnership. I believe there was things that we needed to deliver and there was things that they needed to deliver. And we needed to keep each other accountable. And that's what the meetings were about.
Do you think that partnership set the tone for other states, not just Ray White, for other industries, other brands? Because a lot of people still talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talk about, you talked about before, like what put me on the map was Vivian Yap. Yeah, for sure, definitely helped. What put me on the map as a leader of a network was the partnership plan. Now, I didn't do that. I don't want to take full ownership of this thing either. Like, I remember, I'm pretty sure as I wrote this thing out, I scribbled it on a napkin on a plane home from Perth probably. And I gave it to Tim Snell and said, mate, we should do this. And Tim did what he does and made it better. and then
implements makes it better.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the rest of the team all had input. But as a team, we owned that. It wasn't my thing. It wasn't the network's thing. It was our thing, and we all owned it. And it just absolutely, I've never seen something change a culture so quickly and so dramatically as what that partnership plan did.
And the high performance breakfast. So now I have these moments where people like other brands and even our Ray White CEOs, they talk about high performance breakfast and automatically think, oh, Andrew McCulloch. It's like you've kind of reinvented the way recruitment works. It's a long game now rather than just, hey, do you want to join?
Yeah.
Like that's changed the landscape for recruitment. I remember being at the Mark Boris dinner that you did there for your recruits. One of the things that stood out to me is like you're sitting around the table with 12 high performers and they don't tell anyone they're there. It's like a Chatham House rules, like it's so confidential.
Yeah.
They don't tell people who's at the dinner, who we're trying to recruit. Like how did you build that? Like it's almost odd.
It was like a secret society, but you got to remember these guys wanted to be part of something as well, and it was their thing. So they didn't want it getting bigger. They didn't want to tell people about it. They didn't want to talk about it, which had its pros and its cons for me. But the people that sat in that room were the people that I wanted to be surrounded with. They were the people I wanted to do business with. They were definitely the people I wanted to join the network. But if they weren't going to join the network, I wanted to have a relationship with them where I've still got people that in that group that I'll ring for advice, that I'll talk to, that I'll bounce things off. They'll pick up my call, they'll return my call, they'll return my text messages. It was a relationship thing. I didn't go into it going, I'm going to put this list of people together to recruit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And look, I think there were 10 people in the room that were non-Ray White. And I can only think that one person didn't join. 9 of them actually came across.
Yep, that'd be right. Because it's funny, the breakfast and like the whole thing stopped in the end because everyone joined. And then we were so busy onboarding these people, and then the avalanche came through of people just wanting to join that all of a sudden we weren't doing the breakfast anymore because we weren't out there prospecting as heavily. People were starting to come to us. We did become a brand of attraction. And it took 24 months. Like it happened quick.
Yeah,
it wasn't
that's so quick in recruitment world.
Real quick. It was surreal to sit in the middle of it and watch it happening and watch the opinion. We talked to people about Ray White and everyone spoke so highly of it throughout Sydney and New South Wales and it may be the rest of the country too. By then I was so focused on New South Wales that I wasn't looking outside of that, but. People didn't speak badly about us. We were the brand to join. We were turning people away. It was just a totally different landscape.
It was, and then everyone's like, "How do we get invited to these things?" Like, you created this fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And then that led to all these high performing people joining you, and then the network looks like all these offices that are firing and on different cylinders, doing different things. Now that's a different sort of battle for you to fix then. How do you make that all work?
Well, yeah, a lot of it. So we had zones, right? And every month I got a management report on how we were performing. Now my aim was always to be number one in every zone. So wherever we weren't number one, I just focused on really hard. So that western suburbs area, we were like 5th. Then JT joined. We were quickly number one.
JT for people, Josh Teslin.
Yeah. And because when he joined, obviously the numbers went up, but then all these other people started joining as well. If it was good enough for JT, it's good enough for them. They wanted to speak to us. And I've singled out Josh there, but that was happening in different marketplaces, and all of a sudden I was looking at that management report and it was like number one. And, it was almost like I'd look at it and go, well, wonder what I'm going to do next. What do I do now that I've conquered this mountain?
So what did that look like? Because that's the next bit I want to talk to you about is that just one day you decided that, hey, this is going so well for me. I've done what I've set out to do. I've recruited so many people and you've built businesses that were struggling when you got there. What's the next iteration? What's the next step for Andrew McCulloch?
We always had a focus on growth. So that never went away. But we would shift and move, and the business evolves, and people go through life cycles of their business. So there's always something happening. But it very much became a focus on how do we make what we've got better, how do we improve our offering, and how do we make sure that retention's there? Because there's no point filling the top of the funnel when the hole in the bottom's as big as the top. So it was very much around retention and making sure we stayed at the top.
What led you to the Gold Coast after that? So what was that one thing that you said, I'm off?
A big part of it, mate, was I was tired. By then I've been 8 years, probably at that point, maybe 6 years in, sitting in that chair, missing my kids' birthdays, answering my phone until midnight at night, getting up early. I was burnt out, and that I put that pressure on myself. Someone said to Dan, "How do you find managing Andrew?" And he said, "I don't need to. He's harder on himself than anyone ever can be." I was just tired, and I remember I was having an argument with someone, probably in one of our corporate offices, around money I'd spent or something I'd done, right? And we were flying to the Gold Coast. My wife and I were flying to the Gold Coast, and I got off the phone. She goes, "Sit down. You can have a heart attack. Like your blood pressure is through the roof." I sat down. She said, "You don't need to do this anymore. Like you've done everything and more than that you set out to do. Like just quit." And I went, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah. Let's move to the Gold Coast." And I went, "Cool. Let's do it."
That was it?
That was it. I quit. That's the second hardest conversation I've ever had. Sitting down with Dan, and I ran through some of my frustrations with him around where I was at, and a lot of I really can't blame anyone else than myself, and probably how I was handling them. Maybe it's just the stress levels were too high. Certainly I've got as I reflect on that, I was stressed, and that was probably the long and short of it. And he kind of looked at me and he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry that you having to put up with some of that stuff." And I said, "Yeah, anyway, I'm out, mate." He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I'm resigning." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I know, I'll probably do some contracting work or something." And he said, "Well, mate, we can't. You got to stay connected." So the next day I was on the board.
On the board from the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
So you had a bit of time to think about where you want to go, what's the next stage of your career. You're still consulting with all the Ray CEOs and everything else. And that led you to your next part, because you started selling, in 2004?
Yeah.
2004, you started selling, running businesses. 2008, you give it up. But now you're going full circle.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us what's next on the horizon for you?
Yeah, look, I'd come off the back of running that New South Wales business. That was a multi-billion-dollar business. It was a big business. Like I said, it was a lot of stress. And I thought I needed a break. So moving to the Gold Coast, bought a house on the water, got a boat, did all that stuff. And there's only so many days you can take your boat out. And,
we can happily swap. That's fine.
Well, mate, be careful what you wish for, because I thought that's what I wanted. And so I took this role on with Dan, and then that sort of grew into the role that I've officially got today as I sit here. And I kind of felt like it was, I don't want to say going backwards, but it wasn't the intensity that I was used to. And whilst I probably didn't want to go back to that level at that time, I was bored and I needed something else. So I sat down with Dan 2 weeks before my 40th birthday, and I said, "Mate, what are we doing? What do you want? What do you want out of this?" And I feel like I'm not giving you back value, and it's a big thing for me where I need to be giving back value in anything that I'm doing. It's just not in me to sit on the sidelines and just collect my paycheck. It's just not in me. And we kind of talked about that, and he kind of admitted that I was a little bit on the sideline, but it was important that I stay connected to the brand, and with the history that I had with the brand and the things that I'd done and the connections that I had and friends like you, what I mean? It was important that I stayed part of the family business in some way, shape or form. And he said, "Mate, go away and have a think about that. Do you want to open a business?" And I said, "No way. No, thank you.
I've seen what it's like."
Yeah, no, I didn't want that. And so I went away and I thought about it, and I thought maybe I do. Maybe I'm ready. I remember calling Jason Andrew and saying, "Mate," I gave him this big long-winded story. Well, I started to. He cut me off. He goes, "What do you want? What do you want to do? What are you telling me this? Do you want to have a business?" And I said, "Maybe." He goes, "Right, let's catch up for dinner next week. I've got a few options." That's it.
That's it.
That's how it started.
So what did you buy into?
So I bought.
First to know, our audience is first to know.
Yeah. Well, announcement will be up tomorrow. I bought 4 Ray Watt offices in the northern Gold Coast. So Runaway Bay, Paradise Point, Sovereign Island, and Pack Pines. It excited me because of where it was, that northern corridor. You look at the central Gold Coast and south, and there's some big players in there. You know, some big Ray White offices. You got Koloshi, you got Coastal, you got these big businesses now, and they're all sort of scrapping it out. You head north, and they haven't gone up there yet. I don't want to say, you know, there's some great talent up there, but it doesn't seem to be as competitive. So I felt when you looked at the price point as well, it didn't seem to be as expensive as that sort of central and south. So I felt that it's still got plenty of growth left in it. You're still buying waterfront houses for under $2 million. Like, it's crazy. It's coming out of Sydney where that would cost you 20, 30 million. $1.8 million a year buying a house on the water and these sort of runaway bay and things like that. So I saw it as an opportunity now. The business is currently doing circa 10 million, just shy of 400 property managements, going well, but in my opinion, there's so much left in it. You know, that business will double over the next 12 to 24 months. It will 4x in the next 5 years. The current principal has been in there a long time, has got some other focuses, and probably just hasn't quite given it the attention maybe that it could have. I'm not going to go back selling. I'm done selling. So my sole focus is just going to be on leading the people in there. You know, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with Ray White New South Wales. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to look at the culture. I'm going to recruit hard. I'm going to bring youth through while supporting the business that's there today. So it's a little bit like deja vu for me. Now that I think about it, it's going to be a lot of hard work.
Well, it's not anything that you haven't done before.
No.
And the opportunity is where you live. It's the area you're passionate about now.
Yep.
And it's recruitment, which you have recruited some of the best agents across Australia, some of the best businesses. And the business that you bought, it's been on the high for so long.
Yeah.
And some of these principals, like, they've done their dash because they've done really well. And they just need enthusiasm and youth to come in and, you know.
Look, I think the credit to Ali, who's the principal in there now. He built a great business. He bought that business off someone else, and he took it to the next level. And like you say, it's just time for some new leadership in there to come in and go again. So it's pretty exciting.
What do you think of the brand, the Ray White brand and the Gold Coast? Like, what can you do? It's already strong.
Yep.
What are you going to do to make it stronger?
Very much like Ray White New South Wales. It was a strong brand that still had a huge amount of potential left in it. You know, you've got some great things happening in the Gold Coast for Ray White now. You've got, you know, Tiger down south doing some fantastic things. He's expanding his business. You know, I feel like there's change in the air around that surface area. And then you've got myself up top. You've got Matty McCulloch there. We've got some really strong younger people in there now. And so it's a bit of a changing of the guard. And I feel like this move for me, you know, there's been some exciting things happen in the Gold Coast maybe 10, 15 years ago, but these are big moves that are happening now. This is going to shake the industry up. I'm bringing a bit of that Sydney aggression to the Gold Coast around recruitment for sure. I've already started.
I can tell you're ready to go.
Yeah, man, I'm good to go. So I'm fresh. I'm energized. I took a month off last month. I went traveling, came back with a whole new attitude on life, you know. And I feel the last 2 years of just slowing down a little bit and sort of looking after myself a little better. You know, I promised I'd come into my 40s healthy, fit. You know, I've taken the time to go and do that, and I'm ready.
If this all works, and it will, what does success look like for you?
Much like that CEO role, I've got to walk away from it in much better shape than what I took it on. I have a goal to double that business in the next 12 to 24 months. I'd like to say 12 because I think I can do it.
You double that business, takes you to top 5 in Ray White Queensland easily.
Yeah. I talked a little bit before about self-limiting belief. Like, it wasn't that long ago that a good business was a $5 million business. And then a good business was 10 million, 20, 30, 40. We're knocking on the door of $50 million businesses now. What's changed? Like, yeah, property value's gone up a bit. I get that. But what's changed is self-limiting belief. I don't know if you've heard the backflip story, the bikes.
No, I haven't. No.
So when I was younger, I lived with a bunch of guys that used to ride motocross, and no one could backflip a bike. Like, it just didn't happen. One day, one of them backflipped. The next day, all of them backflipped bikes. And that was a lesson in business for me on self-limiting belief. Watching these guys, nothing changed. The ramp didn't change, the bike didn't change, the people didn't change. Nothing changed apart from someone actually pulled it off, and then everyone else went, oh, you can do that. And then everyone did it. And I think that I see this happen in real estate all the time. You know, to see JT, what did he write last year, 10 million or something?
I know, it was in his collar somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, far out, like 10 million, but no one...
From Western Sydney.
Yeah, no one could do that like a few years ago. I've watched this on Pulse, and I watched, you know, Gavin Rubenstein, Vivian Yap, Josh Teslin. Those guys, I truly believe this. They all do better because of one another. Because they get on Pulse, which is an app that we've got at Ray White, where it's, you know, amongst other things, it has a leaderboard on there in real time. And they're watching that thing every day.
And they all three of them came into business ownership with you.
Gavin made that transition whilst I was in there, but you know that was, but yeah, the other two for sure, yeah, for sure. So it's, you know, I used to like looking at it too for that reason.
Daily.
Yeah. But it just shows you the power of having those people around you, you know, and that's what I say when I was recruiting. You know, why would I join Ray White? Well, you get to rub shoulders with some of the best in the business. You will be better just for that. You will be better just because you are around better people. And it's true. Like you can't argue that. Anyone that follows me on Instagram knows I bang on about this all the time. You're the average of the top 5 people you hang out with, right?
I think you share that quote once a week.
Yeah, I do, because I believe it.
Yeah, you believe it.
I believe it, and I say to people when they're having a tough time, like, who are the people around you? Who have you got in your life? Where are you? You know, I talked about having to move to Sydney to change my environment. You know, there's this thing going viral at the moment about the price of water. You know, it's $1 here and it's $5 here, and what changes the same bottle of water? It's the only thing that changes is the environment or the place that it's at. So, you know, being in the right place and having good people around you, you won't succeed without those. I can promise you. If you've got, you know, bad people around you, you will just be another bad person.
Well, I can speak for myself and some of the Ray White principals in the network here. We're looking forward to having you in the network and challenging us and, you know, working with us, and hopefully we can all grow. But thank you so much for being on Call Me Successful today.
Thanks, Avi. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.